8 years ago, I ruined my life, at least according to some. I walked away from my marriage. There are a lot of reasons why I walked away from that marriage, but the main one being that it was just toxic. Welcome back, friends. Thanks for joining. If you're new here, I'm Jen, single mom, artist, and entrepreneur, and this channel is all about helping other single parents to live a life that they love and to do it all on their own. Now, as I said, the marriage that I left 8 years ago was toxic in many ways. Toxic to the point that I required some therapy in order to move forward, but I have moved forward. But I want to talk to you today about actually filing for that divorce. Because if you are facing every morning waking up to a toxic marriage and you are considering divorce, then you need to know that there are some hard parts. And let me tell you, the hard parts are very, very hard. But there's also some good things that come from filing that paperwork. So let's kind of dig into it. We're going to start by talking about the hard parts. So if you're watching this because you need this information, stick it out to the good parts, okay? Because we're going to get to those. But I want to talk about the hard parts first because I want you to have a clear understanding of reality. So to start with, divorce is expensive. The financial burden of divorce proceedings will be costly. Not only are the proceedings costly, but sometimes some of the other pieces are as well, like dividing assets. And sometimes those divisions aren't made as equally as maybe they should be. There's a big emotional toll that comes from ending a long-term relationship, even a toxic one. You're still going to grieve. You are still going to go through the entire grieving process because this is someone who you built a life with, who you envisioned a life with, and the life that you envisioned is what you're grieving. You may also grieve the person that you married. You may grieve the good things about that partner that you're divorcing. There will be grief. You will go through a grieving process and it will take an emotional toll. It's not easy. But that piece is actually probably one of the easier pieces of the whole thing. You will potentially suffer a loss of your social network, meaning friends that were built through that marriage. Now, generally speaking, that impacts men more so than women. Statistics have shown, research has shown, and I don't have any of those in front of me, but I can find one if you really need to see the statistics. But statistically speaking, women tend to keep more friends in a divorce than men do. And that's because women are, as a general rule, we are the relationship builders. We're the ones who tend to bring more friendships into the marriage, and therefore we tend to leave that marriage with more friendships. There will be co-parenting challenges and challenges navigating custody. Some of those challenges will be legal, and some of them will just be emotional and difficult. Co-parenting is probably the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life. It's just difficult in a lot of ways, especially if you have fundamental disagreements upon how children should be disciplined or what things matter the most to make a big deal out of. For instance, for me, food is not a battle that I fight. If my kid doesn't want to eat something, they don't have to. If my kid wants to eat peanut butter and jelly every day for lunch, which my son does, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as he is eating and he is healthy, I don't care what he eats. That's not a battle that I'm going to fight, partially because he's autistic. And so there's a lot of sensory issues around food. So there are so many other battles to fight. Food is just not one that I'm willing to fight. I would much rather put my energy and concern into worrying about how he's doing at school or worrying about how he is doing in his relationships with other people than worrying about what he's putting in his mouth. I figure as long as he's healthy, that's just not a topic that I'm going to fight him over. It's not worth it. There are other more important battles. My ex-husband is a little bit more worried about the food issue and feels like some of those other battles are less important. So Co-parenting is going to be a difficult piece because there are going to be places where you have fundamental disagreements on what it matters enough to battle over. I think the biggest one, and probably the most important one, is the impact that the divorce will have on your children and how you help them cope with those changes. Kids are so good at bouncing back from things. They're amazing. They can endure so much, but that doesn't mean that we should leave them out in the cold to figure things out on their own. That doesn't mean that they won't be affected. It doesn't mean that you won't see changes in their behavior and that their schoolwork won't suffer, because all of that will be true. All of that will happen. They are very resilient, but they will suffer from some of those changes. It will be hard for them. I highly recommend that all kids going through divorce should be put into some sort of counseling. Not all kids are receptive to that, but it's worth a try. At least it gives them an opportunity and an outlet to speak to someone about how they're feeling about things around the divorce that aren't mom or dad, or mom and mom, or dad and dad. Because their parents are the people they most do not want to make upset. So they're not going to come talk to you about something they're upset with their spouse over because they don't want to make you angry, and vice versa. I highly recommend that we put kids in some form of counseling during and after a divorce solely so that they have the opportunity to speak about their feelings to someone who's impartial and has no horse in that race, right? The next one definitely affects women more than men, and that is the stigma surrounding divorce. In some communities and cultures, divorced parents, specifically women, are very much treated like second-class citizens. Single moms have a bad rep in most countries that I can think of, honestly. Most countries act like if you're a single mom, somehow you've done something wrong. Somehow you're not a good person. There's something fundamentally that is a problem with you because you're a single mother. I find that almost funny, right? Because as a single parent who has primary custody, you literally are the parent who took on the hardest job. So that's silly to me. And I don't care whether you're the mom or the dad. If you have primary custody, you have the harder part of the job. Why the hell are we treating you like crap? That's dumb. It's just dumb. Makes no sense. But it's a reality, and it's a reality that we have to face. And it is something that people will express their opinion about that to you. Whether their opinion means a damn thing or not, they're going to tell you what they think. Now, I personally don't give a shit. You can think what you want about the fact that I'm a single mom. I chose to be a single mom. That's a conscious decision that I made when I filed for divorce. I chose this life. If you don't like it, that's your problem, not mine. Another thing that's really hard is navigating the legal system. It's not set up to be able to be dealt with by yourself. Can you act as your own attorney? Sure you can, but that's not in anybody's best interest ever. There are filings that have to be made, procedures that have to be followed, and none of that is written out clearly for the public. The system is not set up to be easy for you to go in, file for a divorce on your own, do the things that you want on your own. None of it's set up to be easy. Do you have to have a lawyer? You don't have to. Is it in your best interest to get an attorney? Yeah, it really is. They'll make sure that you don't forget about the important things, or that you think about things that could come down the road in the future. They will, especially with custody issues, man, I'm telling you, custody is tricky and difficult. In most states, visitation and custody are completely and 100% separate from child support. So these are two different things you have to file for and go after. These are two different issues to deal with completely. Now this one, child support, is dependent on custody, but custody has to be determined first, and visitation schedules are effective regardless of whether support is paid or not. And it doesn't matter who's paying the support, whether it's mom or dad or whatever, or custodial parent or non-custodial parent, because sometimes even the custodial parent is the one that ends up paying support to the non-custodial parent in some cases, because it's all based on a formula, right? These days, child support in every state that I can think of, I'm in Indiana. In Indiana, it's based on a formula. Parent A plugs in their income, parent B plugs in their income. They plug in how many overnights each parent has. They decide who's gonna put the kids on their health insurance and what that health insurance costs. And a computer calculates the magic number of what support should be paid and who should pay it. It just can be a very, very difficult system to navigate, and the best way to navigate it is by getting legal representation, which again is expensive. Probably the most daunting aspect is having to rebuild your life. In my case, I kept our family home, so I didn't have to find a new place to live. But many people find themselves having to find a new place to live on top of potentially new income, potentially a new support system. Rebuilding your life can be difficult, especially if you're the person who lost some of those social connections. So building a new life is daunting. It can be extremely overwhelming, and that is oftentimes put in the hard category. And while it is hard, don't get me wrong, it is very, very hard, it can also be fun. So I actually consider that to be one of those things that's a crossover, because yes, you have the hard part of rebuilding your life, but you also get to rebuild your life. You get to redecide the kinds of friendships you want to keep. You get to redecide the kinds of people that you want to associate. You get to redecide who you are. So that's a crossover one. Okay, I have two more hard things that I want to talk about, and then we're going to get to the really awesome things. There's a giant potential for ongoing conflict or communication issues with the ex-spouse. If a marriage was toxic, the divorce will be even more so. I wish that wasn't true, but it is. Just because this person and you no longer share a home under the same roof does not mean that the confrontation and the walking on eggshells and the problems and the toxicity are gone. It just means they happen in a different way. They will still exist, and in some cases they will escalate, especially if the marriage was abusive in any way. Those problems with communication, those problems with conflict will probably get worse before they get better. I hate that that's the truth, but it is. There are ways to mitigate that by choosing how you will communicate with that other person, by setting extremely firm boundaries with that other person and not giving in to them. There are ways to mitigate some of that, but there will be conflict, there will be communication issues. Even when a marriage ends on the best of terms, those things will still exist. But if the marriage was toxic, the divorce will be more so. So that's something you have to be prepared for. It doesn't mean that that will last forever, and it doesn't mean that that is a reason not to do it. But it's something you should be prepared for. And probably, I've said that the kids were the hardest. The kids are the hardest on an emotional level. The one that's hardest physically is the uncertainty that comes with now having to take care of your household financially 100%, especially in cases where one spouse carried the financial burden more so than the other spouse. Like in my case, I was only working part-time when I filed for divorce, and prior to that I'd been a stay-at-home mom for 6 or 7 years. So my earning potential was a third of what it would be of a woman of my same age who had worked all of that time. That is terrifying. It's terrifying to not know for sure if you're going to be able to pay the bills every month. In fact, it was probably the scariest thing. I actually recall that I sat down and I made a spreadsheet, and because I'm that girl who has to be really prepared for things, okay? So I made a spreadsheet and I put all of my bills, all of the bills I knew I would have, so all of my expenses, my little bit of income, and I included what I thought child support would be decided at, and I was still $2,000 in the hole every month just to pay the bills. And I saw that number and I thought, holy shit, how am I going to do this? Maybe I can't file for divorce. And you know, in the end, I decided that the toxicity was too much and the money didn't matter. And the truth is, the money didn't matter. Happiness outweighs money every single day in my book. There were so many months where I don't know how the bills got paid. I really don't. People ask me, how do you make this work as a single mom? And I make this joke that it's all duct tape and miracles, but the truth is, it kind of is all duct tape and miracles. Like, I don't know how it works either, because on paper, most of the time, it shouldn't. I really don't know how I pull it off. A lot of the times, it just doesn't look like it should work on paper. It just doesn't. And yet, by some miracle, it does. I think it comes down to, if it matters, you find a way. And I've kind of always clung to that. If it matters, you find a way. If it matters, you find a way. And my kids matter. Their lives matter. And so I will always find a way. Okay, enough of my little soapbox. Let's talk about the good. The number one reason, if your marriage is toxic, to go ahead and get that divorce is that it will mean increased happiness for both of you. Your spouse might not be happy with you for filing for divorce, but if the marriage is toxic, they're not happy either. They just don't know they're not happy. Increased happiness is worth so much. It is being happy. It's the difference between a life worth living and a life not worth living. And I can't stress how important that is. And if your marriage is toxic, you're not happy. You're also going to find enormous opportunities for personal growth and rediscovery of self. And I feel like that's worth a lot too. You literally get to reinvent who you are. You get to decide who you want to be from today on. Okay, up until now, I've been this woman who walks on eggshells, who gives in and doesn't keep my own boundaries because I feel like I need to keep the peace. But today, starting today, I get to set boundaries. I get to enforce boundaries. I get to decide how people treat me. I get to decide how I show up in this world. And that is pretty damn cool. While the initial divorce and the adjustment period for change is happening, things will be hard with your kids. They will. But as time goes on, you will find decreased conflict with your kids because of the decreased conflict in the home. Kids respond to their environment. We all do. We all respond to our environment. And when things within your home are toxic and people are unhappy, your children are feeding off of that. So any conflict you are having with your kids is being influenced by the conflict between you and your spouse. And like I said, conflict will go up between them initially because change is hard for everyone and divorce is extremely hard on kids. It is. But over time, that level of conflict between you and your kids will go down. It will decrease because the conflict in your home decreased. That is worth a lot. You will have new freedom to pursue your interests. I would say, and your hobbies, but the truth is, as a single parent, I don't have any hobbies that aren't also income producing. I don't have time for hobbies that aren't income producing. You probably won't have time for non-income producing hobbies either. At least not for several years. I mean, we're just being realistic here, right? But that doesn't mean you won't have the opportunity to explore new interests. If you want to learn something that your spouse didn't find valuable, then probably you lessened its value to you. Now you can learn that thing that you found valuable. While it can be terrifying to know that the buck stops solely with you, it can also be incredibly liberating. You're in charge. You get to decide where your money gets spent and where it doesn't. You can have the benefit of improved mental and emotional well-being. Now, early on in divorce, it probably won't be improved. I highly recommend everyone go to counseling and get some therapy, because healing is hard. And especially if your marriage was toxic in a lot of ways, healing is not linear either. I went to therapy for a while right after my divorce, and I'm going again now. And that's because healing is not linear. So things will come up in the future that you realized you didn't deal with before, and now it's time to, and now you're ready to. It's work, and it's continued work. But the benefit of that is that you get to be a better version of you, and you get to decide when you're ready to level up and when you're ready to take some time off from working on that. It's all at your own pace, and there's nobody to contend with but yourself, and that is pretty amazing. And probably one of the biggest positives to divorcing from a toxic marriage is that now you have the potential for more equal and respectful partnerships in the future. That is worth a lot. Knowing that you can become a better version of yourself, and then that better version of you can in the future find the best possible partner for you. If you've watched my channel for any length of time, then you know that I have actually quit dating. But that doesn't mean that I will never date again. It just means that I'm not in that place right now where that's where my focus is. It's not what I want to spend my time and energy on right now. But someday I'll be ready to spend my time and energy there again. And I love knowing that when that day comes, I've already done the work to make me the person that I want to be and the person that I want to bring into a new relationship. So I can concentrate on finding a partner who has also done that work and decided who they want to be going forward. And I can concentrate on finding that person that is right for me. So that potential for my future is pretty exciting. And just because I'm not looking for that right now, that doesn't make it less exciting to know that it's out there, right? In the end, only you can decide what's best for you. Only you can know what your values are and if this relationship is something you want to continue. There are many reasons that people stay in bad marriages. And most of them I don't think are very good reasons. I hear about people that stay for the kids a lot. And the truth is, I think that most of the time, those kids would probably be a lot happier and healthier and more well-adjusted if their parents were honest with themselves and each other about how bad their marriage was. Because those kids are feeling it. They know your marriage isn't good. They know there are problems. They know that there are things that are being ignored. And I think that just teaches them that the best way to deal with things is to shove them under the rug and pretend like that they don't exist. And I don't know that that's good. Just my personal opinion. You have to do what's best for you and your family. I hope that this was helpful in some way. If you're struggling with a major life decision, like whether or not to divorce your partner, I hope that you have a support system in place. I wish you hope and I wish you love moving forward. Staying in a bad marriage is extremely hard. Leaving a bad marriage is also extremely hard. It's a question of choosing which hard is going to be the more tolerable and the one that makes the most sense for you. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time.